Good afternoon. Voting in the Democratic Republic of Congo's long-anticipated presidential election has gotten off to a slow start due to torrential rain in the capital and long delays at some polling stations in the east. 3 opposition strongholds will not be voting after authorities cancelled polls there, citing health risks from an ongoing Ebola outbreak and ethnic violence. President Joseph Kabila is due to step down. President Kabila came to power in the DRC in 2001, taking over from his father, Laurent Kabila, who was assassinated by one of his own bodyguards. President Joseph Kabila was initially credited with bringing relative peace and reviving the mining of the country's vast mineral reserves. But conflicts persist and millions of Congolese remain trapped in poverty amid widespread allegations of corruption. His second and final constitutional mandate ended 2 years ago, but he stayed in power amid growing protests and calls for him to step aside. Well, outgoing Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila vowed that the election would be free and fair after casting his ballot in Kinshasa in the presidential election that will see him step down after 18 years in power. After casting his ballot, he called on the Congolese people to come out and cast their votes peacefully.
I don't have any concerns as I speak to you. My only concern is that we have this very heavy rain and probably voter turnout might be low, but hopefully the skies will clear and the voters will turn out in numbers. But it's clear that the elections are free and fair and will definitely be free and fair.
Well, for the latest on the DRC election, we're joined via Skype from Lubumbashi by Aime Zonveni, editor of the Kinshasa Times. Aime, tell us, have you voted?
I unfortunately have not, because I was registered in Kinshasa in August. Then I relocated to Lubumbashi to cover activities and developments unfolding here. And there was no possibility for voters that have been registered in one area to vote in a different area than where they were registered. So unfortunately, I have not voted.
Okay, so from your information on the ground, you've sent your reporters out to various centers. How is the process going?
Well, those in Kinshasa, the capital city, have reported that there have been delays at a number of polling stations that they have visited. They have also reported that the voting machines in some areas were either not functioning properly, or they took time to turn them on and finally get them up and running. Myself here in Lubumbashi, I was able to visit a number of polling stations where I have seen long queues, but the voting operations relatively were happening here without any problems, and I was able to interview a couple of observers who have indicated that they were only facing challenges to be in the polling stations permanently. They are taking rounds of 30 minutes or thereabouts to be in the polling stations and then out in order to conduct their observation and also in order to be witness to political parties and coalitions.
Now, are there any concerns so far about the voting process?
Well, especially in areas that were not going to vote, we're talking more specifically about Beni, Butembo, and Yumbi. The populations and the voters there are quite unhappy to see that they will not be able to participate in these historical votes. In other areas, incidents have been reported that queues were very long and that the elections could actually go beyond the 4 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, which was actually the deadline for people to cast their ballots today.
Now, there have been reports of heavy rains. Has that affected the voter turnout?
It definitely will, especially in Kinshasa. It has rained cats and dogs. Lubumbashi also has been very rainy throughout the month of December, but lucky enough, this Sunday was very sunny and very bright, so there was not any rain in Lubumbashi. My reporters in eastern DRC, in Bukavu more specifically, and Goma have also reported that no rains have fallen in that part of the country, but definitely areas that have been affected by heavy rains will show reduced turnout for this vote. But that being said, I think the DRC population are still very much adamant to go out in the masses and cast their ballots in their expression.
Now, Amy, there have been reports of sporadic pockets of violence in parts of the country. Are your reporters able to confirm this?
No, recently, but not as of today, but it has been reported, especially from the western part of the country, in Yumbi. In the run-up to the elections, there was violence that has eventually led the Electoral Commission, the CENI, to cancel or actually postpone the voting operations in those areas. Beni also has been volatile, but up until recently, today and this week, no reports of violence has been indicated. So relatively, in the run-up to the elections, yes, there have been violence, but as we are culminating to the process, violence tended to be relatively quiet.
Now, we've heard reports that voters in the streets of Kinshasa said they would not have the time to vote with just one machine per 700 voters. Is this currently the case?
Understandably so, because Kinshasa initially was meant to have about 10,000 voting machines, but it is reported that more than 1,000 electronic voting machines were at the end of the day not being able to be deployed to the various polling stations, which will result in increasing the number of registered voters by 100 at each polling stations. And this, in turn, will lead to longer queues and therefore longer times for the increased number of voters in the polling stations to cast their ballot. So we might end up maybe missing the deadline of 1600 this afternoon, which was indicated for everyone to cast their ballots.
Now, which political leaders still holds the aces, all four aces, as the polls suggest?
It is difficult to tell, but if we go by what Bercy, Polestar, and Ipsos South Africa have indicated, which are just pollsters' indications, it appears that Martin Fayulu, based on the latest poll, is still might be emerging victorious. Now, that is what the polls have indicated. But you know that the DRC is a vast country, twice the size of South Africa, with quite a limited infrastructure. So it will be very difficult to have a very representative sample of DRC people at a very limited amount of time in order to come up with a poll that is reflective of the reality of the ground. But if we go by what Ipsos and Bercy said, it should be a Martin Fayulu, but we need to take that with a pinch of salt.
Okay, so the current situation is that the polls have opened late due to the rain, and there are some logistical problems that are affecting the voting process. Thank you very much indeed. I'm Zonveni, editor of the Kinshasa Times. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Thank you. Well, to discuss the DRC elections, we're joined now in studio by Claude Ebalanki Ekolomba, the special advisor to Felix Tshisekedi, the leader of the Union for Democracy and Social Progress Party. Thank you for joining us, sir.
You're welcome.
Now, can you explain to us what is the voting process in the DRC?
Well, today the voting has started. It's going on, not as good as we would have hoped for. You know, there are some voting stations. Up to now, the voting have not started, and it's already midday in Kinshasa. In some places, the officials have forgotten the password of the voting machines, but in other places, the voting is going on quite well.
Okay. Now, in terms of this is a presidential election. How do they directly vote for the president himself, or are they voting for the party? What is the structure like, and how does it feed into the actual final result?
Well, the voting system in Congo is that it's a direct vote.
Yes.
So people go in a voting poll and they vote the president directly. They vote the individual,
Yes.
not the party. And at the same time, they also vote for their MP, for the national MP. And at the same time, they vote for the local MP as well.
Okay.
So the three elections are combined into one. So you vote for the president directly, and then you vote for your MP.
Okay. Now, this is the first time that electronic voting systems are being allowed in the DRC, in the presidential and parliamentary elections. Do you think the voters are well informed? What has the voter education process been like?
Well, the voter education has been quite weak, especially inside the massive, vast country of the DRC. In Kinshasa, or people who have access to electronics, the Electoral Commission sent forth some clips on how to vote. But for the people in the village, they've been absolutely no vote
They start with the
education.
technology that is required for them to actually learn about the voting process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for many of them, it will be the first time that they'll be seeing a computer or a voting machine per se.
So now, I take it then that you do have some concerns about the voting process today.
Yes, we do. For the moment, we're busy recording. We're busy taking note of everything that's going on. And then in due course, we bring it forth.
When you say in due course, what is your recourse? How are you going to be able to bring it forward, and what is your aim?
Well, the aim is, first we want free and fair election.
Yes.
That much is clear. So we don't want to disturb the electoral process. So we want people to vote, and then the observers are there. We're engaging with the observers.
Yes.
We're engaging with the media, with the international community, where we put forth whatever we feel or we see has gone wrong. And if that has an impact on the result,
Yes.
then we take it the next step.
Sure. Now, President Joseph Kabila this morning when he voted, he said he wants the elections to be free and fair. What is your take on this so far, in your observation of what has taken place this morning?
Well, my take is that's what we all want, but saying is one thing and doing is the other. I mean, Mr. Joseph Kabila have had an extra 2 years to prepare for this election, and yet just last week they requested another 1 week. So you want free and fair election, you've had over 2 years to prepare for them, you didn't do it, so saying in one thing and doing is another thing. We don't believe what he's saying. We want to see it.
Now, as the special advisor to Felix Tshisekedi, who is one of the candidates, are you allowed to be observers at the polling stations?
Oh yes, we have party agents. We're allowed to have at least one party agent per polling station. And then, the Congo has got about, for these elections, we have about 75,000 polling stations across the country. So we're allowed to have at least one party agent.
You have like 75,000 party agents.
Yes.
And all
and there we
things.
also had problems because some of our observers
Yes.
up to now have not been accredited. So they can't really have access
Yes.
to the center.
So they're not actually doing the job of observing.
Exactly.
All right. So, but from the ones that are actually in the polling stations, what kind of information are you able to extract from them?
Oh yeah, we're getting a lot of information. We set up a control center, a command room, a war room, where we're receiving all the feedback from all our observers.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what are the chances that your party is going to win? Since the different polls have put either Fayulu, and we've just heard from our editor of the newspaper there, or Tshisekedi as a favorite to win. So is it Fayulu or Tshisekedi?
Well, Mr. Tshisekedi is going to win,
Yes.
not because I represent him,
Yes.
but because he's the most popular politician in the country.
Yes.
He's the one who's fought for peace, stability, and democracy in the country in a very consistent manner for a very long time.
Yes.
The polls, nobody believes in those polls. Those polls are commissioned by individuals.
polls.
Those opinion polls are commissioned by individuals. They're influenced by those people.
Yes.
They pay and buy for them. In fact, the best way for you to read it
Yes.
is to reverse those polls. When they say Fayulu is 46% and Tshisekedi is 27%, it's actually the other way
That's
around.
kind of a cynical approach, but I hear what you're saying.
Yes.
Of course, these are opinion polls, but those opinion polls also do happen to have an impact on voters' behavior and voters' choices.
Well, true. That's why those who commission them, that's what they seek to achieve.
Yes.
But fortunately for us, and very unfortunately for
Yes.
them, the people on the ground, they don't listen, they
Yes.
don't follow those polls. You don't have a mature kind of society or voting society in Congo that will listen to what the polls are saying. They know who their leader is, they follow their leader. I'll give you one simple example. 2 days ago, some opposition party led by Fayulu called for a stay-away day. And it was observed by less than 0.1% of the population. How can you have what the poll claimed to have, and you fail to mobilize 1% of the population to stay away?
To stay away, yeah. Well, I spoke to one of his advisors the other day, and he said that there was some kind of intimidation that took place, and that people were not allowed, access to those areas. But just coming back to your party now, and Tshisekedi as a candidate, how do you see Tshisekedi's chances as opposed to Fayulu?
Well, our adversary is not Fayulu. Let me start.
He's not.
We want to change the system. Our main adversary is Kabila and the system.
Yes.
So we're not fighting against Fayulu.
Yes.
Okay, we want change.
And Shadare.
Exactly. So the people want change. The people of Congo have suffered enough.
Yes.
It's time for change. And this election represents the hope of those people. And as it stands, we are the party and the leader that represent the best chance of bringing about the change and fulfilling the hope of the people.
Now, given the fact that this is an electronic election, are there also, printed ballot papers available to those voters who are not able to read the electronics, in an educated way?
Well, no, there isn't, but there's both.
Yes.
So you go into the voting machine, you select your candidate, and then it's going to give you a printout with the name of your candidate or your two candidates for the presidential election and for the parliamentary election.
Okay.
So now that printout now constitutes the paper, which you put in the ballot.
Okay.
So, but you start in the machine. You start in the voting machine first. Yes.
Okay. So the printout is actually only your choices. It does not reflect the full ballot and people making crosses and etc.
No, you make the cross in the machine. Yeah. So the machine will bring out all the candidates.
Yes.
So you have, for instance, 10,000 candidates for 500 parliamentary seats.
Yes.
So you got to know the number of your candidate. You go to that number, select your candidate, and print out. But we've been training our people to make sure that whatever they've selected is really what reflects in the printout.
Of course. Now, you have also painted a picture of the challenges that your candidate, Tshisekedi, and other candidates have faced in attempting to bring a democratic election to play. Are you hopeful that the DRC will ultimately have a pure democracy?
Well, hopeful, yes, but it's a process. It's a very long process. It's a battle that have started many years ago, culminating in this day, which the current regime did not want this day to happen. So that's a victory for the people. A lot of blood has been shed. Our people have died. A lot of young people lying in prison, in jail at the moment, in the name of the fight for the freedom of the country. So we are hopeful. We are not only hopeful, but it's a fight. It's a cause that we are determined to see through.
Well, thank you very much indeed for coming to the studio and giving us your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that was Claude Ebalanki Ekolomba, the special advisor to Felix Tshisekedi, who is one of the candidates in the elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We'll have more news coming up after this break. Don't go away.